Hello everyone, here I'll be dealing with the structural and functional unit of our neural system that is called as neuron. Why it is called a structural unit? Because millions of neurons ultimately make a very big fiber. So that is makes the structure of the nervous system, and it is functional unit because the nervous system is all about transmitting the impulses from CNS to the organ or maybe organ to the CNS, and this function is done by these type of cells called as neuron. Okay, ultimately neuron is structural as well as functional unit of our neural system, and mainly neuron consists of three important parts. This part is actually called as the cell body, and these parts you could see it actually from the main cell body, some structure which actually projecting outwards, it is called as the dendrites, and this part is called as axon. Okay, so three important parts you need to remember, very simple. Let me just draw the diagram so that you can understand the concept better. So first we draw a dendrite. Okay, so this is actually the dendrite which is projecting out from the main cell body. Okay, so like this, and this portion is actually called as the cell body. Okay, fine. So this is actually the cell body, and this cell body actually contains a nucleus, and it also contains the Golgi apparatus, even endoplasmic reticulum, even ribosomes, everything is there, and even mitochondria, everything is there like a normal cell. Okay, and it has got a very long cylindrical portion, and this part of the neuron is called as axon. This is axon. Okay, and even this particular axon got the terminal. If you look into the axon got two important parts. This part that is just below the cell body is called as axon hillock, and this portion is actually called as axon terminal. It has got two parts. Okay, we'll just label it later. Before that, I just want to tell you one more important thing. If you look into the cell body of the neuron, you could see lot of dot like structures, a granule like structures, and even in this picture also you could see a lot of granule like structure. And what you call for this, you call this as the Nissil's granule. You call this as Nissil's granule. Okay, actually Nissil's granules are nothing but they are formed because of the endoplasmic reticulum, particularly rough endoplasmic reticulum's extensions. Okay, so whatever there on the rough endoplasmic reticulum, so from that these Nissil's granules are produced. Okay, which also produces proteins for these neurons. You may get a question like name the structure which produces proteins in neuron, that is Nissil's granule. Okay, which is also looks like ribosomes. Sometimes it is also like considered as the ribosomes of the neuron is nothing but Nissil's granule, because ribosomes also produces proteins. They are also protein factory. Even in neuron, Nissil's granules are the protein factories. They produce. Okay, so and this structure, and this is actually called as, even the Nissil's granules can also be seen in these structures. These structures are the extensions from the cell body. This is actually called as dendrites. What is the function of this dendrite? Very simple, to collect the nerve impulse, that is stimuli, and then it transmit that nerve impulse to the cell body, then into the axon, and ultimately end of the axon, and one more dendrite will be there of another neuron which will collect the action potential, that is nerve impulse, and this is actually the direction of flow of the nerve impulse between the neurons from dendrites to another dendrite of the another neuron. So it is the direction. Whereas if you look into this structure, that is actually called as the axon. Axon is a very long structure, as I said earlier, and it has got two parts, and this part is actually called as axon hillock. You call it as axon hillock, and this part is actually called as axon terminal. The specialty of the axon terminal is it has got branches. Okay, and it has got branches which looks like this. Okay, so which looks like this. and each branches actually ultimately end with a small vessel like structure, okay, knob like structure, a bulb like structure like this. And this is actually called as synaptic knob. Synaptic knob. Why this is called as the synaptic knob? Very simple, because it contains tiny granule like structures inside like this. Tiny granule like structures will be there inside the synaptic knob, and they are called as synaptic vesicles. They are called as synaptic vesicles. Okay, so that's the reason why they are called as synaptic knob. Actually, if I just magnify this one particular synaptic knob, let me just draw that diagram here, and you could see a structure like this. This is one synaptic knob, and inside the synaptic knob you could see around 2 to 3 circular structures, and this is actually called as synaptic vesicles. What is there inside the synaptic vesicle? You see small tiny chemicals inside each synaptic vesicles, and this is actually called as neurotransmitters. The chemical which is present inside the synaptic vesicle is called as neurotransmitters. Okay, for example, acetylcholine, which is actually a type of neurotransmitter which help in the conduction of nerve impulse from CNS to the muscles. Okay, that is neurotransmitter, a type. Okay, now let us just go with what is there inside the axon. Nothing, a liquid is there. Okay, that is actually called as axoplasm. The liquid which is present inside the axon, a long cylindrical structure, is called as axoplasm, which looks like cytoplasm. But here you don't see Golgi apparatus or endoplasmic reticulum or mitochondria or Nissel's granules. Everything is absent. Only axoplasm will be there. Along with that, some ions will be there. What kind of ions you see inside axoplasm? You see sodium as well as potassium, and some proteins will be there. Some proteins will be there inside the axoplasm. I'll tell you what is the significance of having ions and proteins inside the axoplasm. Now, in some sites in our nervous system, you could see this axon is protected by some cells like this. The axon is surrounded by tiny cells. We know that the type of cells which protects the neuron is called as the glial cells. Okay, I'll write here. The green color ones are nothing but called as glial cells. These glial cells are nothing but the protective cells which is wrapped around the axon like this. You could see here, and but between each cell you could see a gap. Correct? The gap is there. You could see this gap. This is actually, the gap is called as nodes of Ranvier. Nodes of Ranvier. Okay, the gap between two glial cells. But now, what is the specific name of this glial cell which is wrapped around the axon? It has got a specific name. This particular glial cells have got a specific name that is actually called as Schwann cell. Sorry. Okay. SCHWANN. Schwann cells. These Schwann cells are nothing but the glial cells. Okay, which actually protects the axoplasm or axon of the neuron. Okay, so if you just look here, some Schwann cells actually produces fatty layer around its cell membrane like this. It goes on like this. Okay, not all the Schwann cells actually produces this fatty layered structure around them, but only some neuron actually got the ability to produce. Okay, so this structure, this red color structure which is actually produced by the Schwann cell, that is nothing but a fatty layer, is actually called as myelin sheath. So this is myelin sheath. Okay, myelin sheath is nothing but a fatty layer which is produced by the Schwann cells. Not all Schwann cells is able to produce myelin sheath, only some. Okay, so some neurons got this thing. If any neurons got the sheath, that is myelin sheath, around its axon, then it is called as myelinated neuron. If the Schwann cells cannot produce the myelin sheath, then obviously this neuron doesn't contain the myelin sheath, hence the neuron is called as non-myelinated neuron. That's it. But All neurons will have Schwann cells. Got it? Okay, so this is the basic structure. Now, if you just look how exactly the neuron works. Very simple. Let us assume that this is actually the stimulus, a stimuli. It could be like, well, let us assume that this is the skin, and inside the skin we have this neuron, and this is the stimuli. Stimuli could be like, let us assume that it's a sting. Okay, or maybe like you can just imagine a hot plate, whatever it is. Okay, it's a stimuli. Now it is received by the dendrites. Okay, then actually there are something is happening here. Okay, electrochemical gradient will develop. I'll tell you, I'll talk about it later when I discuss about action potential or nerve impulse later. And then it is actually collected by the dendrites, then it moves into the cell body, then into the axon. It moves on like that and ultimately reaches the synaptic knobs. And inside the synaptic knob, as I said earlier, it has got these tiny structures which is actually called as synaptic vesicles. Ultimately this particular action potential, that is nerve impulse, reaches this synaptic vesicle and it hits the synaptic vesicle. Now the synaptic vesicles start moving towards the end of the synaptic knob like this, and now it opens to release the neurotransmitters to outside, and these neurotransmitters are collected by another dendrite of another neuron, and the process goes like that. Okay, this is very, very simple. Okay, let me just erase everything now. This is the basic structure of neuron. Hope you understood this. Let me just explain the types of neuron based on the number of axon and number of dendrites. It is classified into 3 types. Now let us talk about the types of neurons. There are 3 different types of neurons, and it is classified based on the total number of axons and total number of dendrites. But if you take any type of neurons, all will have single axon, but the number of dendrites varies from neuron to neuron. Based on the number of dendrites, actually we can classify the neurons into 3 types. But based on the number of axon and based on the dendrites number, we can classify the neuron into 3 types. But as I said, that axon will be single in all the neurons, but dendrites number varies. Okay, the first type of the neuron, that is actually called as unipolar neuron. Actually, unipolar neuron is not seen in adult human being. It is seen only during embryonic stages, that is before birth. Embryonic stages. Here, if you look into the structure, it has got only one axon, and okay, we'll go with the rough diagram, and a cell body. But dendrites are completely absent. No dendrites at all. How many axons are there? One axon. So this is actually called as unipolar neuron. If you go to the second type, that is a bipolar. Bi means 2 here. But axon number is 1, but dendrites will be 1. Bipolar. Okay, so if you just look into the structure of a bipolar, this is the cell body, and you could see this is dendrite. How many are there? Only 1 dendrite. And you could see this is axon. How many are there? Only 1 axon. Okay, so here 1 axon plus 1 dendrite, which makes bipolar neuron, and these type of neurons will be seen only in our eye, particularly in our retinal cells, retina. So inside our eye we have retina. They play an important role in receiving the light, and these retina cells actually contains the bipolar neuron. So bipolar neuron is nothing but a type of optical nerve. Optical nerve actually. Okay, so if you go to the third type, that is multipolar. Multipolar neurons are very common in our body. Multipolar neurons, and normally you see them in our cerebral cortex. When I explain about the structure of the brain, I'll explain what is exactly the cerebral cortex. So inside our brain, there is a very high rate of nerve impulses. Okay, so there is a continuous movement of the action potential or nerve impulse within the neuron. So we need multiple dendrites to receive them. Got it? For the fast processing. So we just write for this fast processing of these nerve impulses, we need multiple dendrites. So if I just draw the diagram of the neuron that is multipolar, and you could see this is the multiple dendrites and we have got only one axon. So this is actually the thing. So one axon but multiple dendrites. Okay, so this is actually called as multipolar neuron. So these are actually the three different types of neuron based on the number of axon and number of dendrites present in the neuron. So that's all about it. Next we will go to the types of axons. Again, axons can be classified into two types based on the presence of myelinated sheath. When I was explaining about the structure of the neuron, I told you that the Schwann cells, a type of glial cells which actually protects the neuron, we also have the ability to secrete fatty layer around the myelin, that is actually the Schwann cell, and entire new axon will become myelinated. Okay, why we need myelinated? Very simple, to protect the axon, number one. Second thing is, and it actually doesn't allow the movement of the molecules from inside the axon to outside. So it's a kind of like insulation. Got it? It insulates. But there are neurons where they have this Schwann shell, but unfortunately they cannot produce the fatty layer that is called as myelinated sheath. Okay, so here insulation is not there. There is a kind of like leakage of the molecules from outside to inside of the axoplasm. Okay, we see the types of axon. So first type is myelinated axon. Myelinated axon, these are all very important concepts for your competitive part. Myelinated axon. And here actually if I just draw the axon structure, only axon, dendrites and synaptic knob is not required, and you could see these are the Schwann cells, correct? Okay, which is present. I forgot to mention one thing, that each Schwann cell is nothing but a normal cell which got its own nucleus and other cell organelles. Got it? Okay, so this is the nucleus. I forgot to label it earlier. So nucleus. Okay, so these particular Schwann cell sometimes produces a kind of like fatty layer around its cell membrane. Okay, not on the axoplasm or axon. Okay, axon membrane. Only this, that is actually around the Schwann cells. Okay, so this is now myelinated sheath. That's it. So it's a kind of like protection, right? So the movement of the molecules is prohibited. At the same time, actually it also helps for the rapid movement of nerve impulse, correct? So nerve impulse can easily go from one side to the other side of the neuron. So this is one type, like myelinated axon. If you just go with the second type, that is non-myelinated. Even non-myelinated also will have the Schwann cells like this. Schwann cells are present, but you don't see the fatty layer around the Schwann cells. That's it. Okay, so here insulation is not that strong in this case. That's it. So this is the two types of axons. Now let us see the examples. Where exactly you see this myelinated axon? You see them in all cranial nerves. At the same time you see them in the spinal nerves. Okay, so that is nothing but the afferent or efferent nerve fibers. You see myelinated axon for the rapid conduction of the nerve impulse from central nervous system to the organ, or organ to the central nervous system. Okay, whereas non-myelinated axon will be seen in ANS. What is ANS here? Autonomic nervous system. Okay, at the same time you see them in somatic nervous system. These are nothing but type of PNS, peripheral nervous system. Okay, some of the neurons will have non-myelinated, so that is also called as unmyelinated axons. Okay, so please write on the examples. See them, you see them in autonomic nervous system, at the same time somatic nervous system or neural system. Okay, that is nothing but the PNS. Okay, so that's all about from this session. Hope you understood the concept. Thank you very much.